Welcome to the Women Leaders Association Daily Member Podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland. And in each Daily Member Podcast, we will pick out a great speaker from one of our meetings that we thought you would enjoy. You can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or find a networking group near you, or if you just need access to the membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
Absolutely. Hi, Ginger. And first of all, thanks for inviting me to the panel. This is definitely a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I mean, I've been in leadership probably half of my 20 plus year career in technology sales. And I've been at companies that we all know, like Oracle and Salesforce, and small high growth companies like where I am today, Articulate. There's a common thread in leadership that Zaina really hit on, and that is really being invested in developing and advancing the careers of those people that are on your teams. So again, this is really near and dear to my heart. So I look forward to participating and hearing everybody's great ideas.
And Paula, let's go to you next. Paula, can you please give us a self-introduction?
Sure. Delighted to be here. Paula Berg. I have an MBA with a concentration in management. And so this conversation is near and dear to my heart because there are theories and real world practices that have come into being. And the crossroads of that is really fascinating. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. I currently work in government affairs at Pfizer. Before that, I spent a great deal of time on Capitol Hill, most recently with Senator Patty Murray, where I led on all of her health and budget work. I led a team on the budget committee to help figure out the bipartisan budget deal. I led her work, particularly on the workforce section, Title V of ACA, and led that team. And I also helped lead the team on the Joint Committee of Deficit Reduction. Very excited to be here.
Well, we are very excited to have you. Thank you. So, Dolly, we'll go to you next. Dolly, can you please give us a self-introduction?
Sure. And it's really, I just want to say thank you for having me, and that I would go work for Zaina anytime on her team. I thought those were some really, really critical remarks. I came to Washington to be a summer intern for a senator and sort of never left. It just became a career. I started out in pre-med, always interested in healthcare, wanted to be a physician, a pediatrician, and yet I was at Southern Methodist University, which is a very social school. So I was in a sorority and a little sister to a fraternity and in student council. And I finally had a human physiology teacher say to me, "Have you noticed you're the only one in an 8 o'clock physiology class who's like dressed and carrying pledge stuff? And is this really what you want to do?" And he said, "It's only going to get harder and you're going to have less time for social." And so it was this real kind of moment of crisis, declare your major kind of thing. So he asked me a really leading question and said, "What do you do when you get back to dorm? What's your first homework?" And I said, "Oh, it's English. I love to read. I love to write. I'm a bit of a historian and I like to tie history and English together." And he said, I think you just answered your own question." So long story short, ended up with an English and history major and a minor in political science. Came to Washington to be an intern and sort of caught the Potomac fever, as they say, and never left. So I have worked for several trade associations, started out representing medical device manufacturers. I moved to Hoffman LaRoche. I worked for Abbott Laboratories, spent 10 years at Pfizer. So Paula's a neighbor, sort of, in that, an alumni society as I am. And glad to see her at Pfizer, actually. That's really impressive. And most recently, I was at Teva Pharmaceuticals to head U.S. government affairs for them. I have since November left and started my own consulting company, Judge Government Affairs and Associates. I thought it's the only way I'm going to end up being CEO after all my corporate experience. So that's kind of my intro, if you will. But happy to be here and happy to share learnings from across many, many corporations over many years.
We are excited to have you today. And Carrie, we'll go to you. Can you please give us a self-introduction?
Sure. So very excited to be here and part of this panel. Also, this topic is extremely important to me, and I think especially over the last probably 3 years since COVID and really some self-discovery there. My current role, so I'm a traditional marketing background. I joke all the time that my master's program project was developing a website. So this was back in the time of Ask Jeeves, before digital marketing was even a thing. So I had a good opportunity to grow up in the space around digital marketing. I landed in an employer branding role at Sodexo in 2007 and have been in employer branding. So I get an amazing opportunity to tell the stories of employees that work at organizations. A career highlight for me was leading employer branding and recruitment marketing at CVS Health during the pandemic. It was not only the most rewarding time of my life, but it was also the most challenging time. Worked a lot of hours trying to fill positions to be able to bring healthcare and vaccines to communities that may not have the opportunity, don't live in a large metropolitan area. I currently am at EY in a similar position, recruitment marketing, employer branding, for a specific service line. So I've learned a lot in the last 3 years. Can't wait to tell that story, and just really excited to be part of this panel.
Thank you. And finally, Jessica, can you please give us a self-introduction?
Sure. Hello, my name is Jessica Marvintano. I'm Senior Vice President at iHeartMedia. I have been in this role for almost 20 years, this company, so I obviously love it. It's a leading audio company. We're into radio, podcasting, live events, and a digital platform we also run. So always busy, but it combines my love of politics, communications policy, and despite being somewhat of an introvert, focusing on social skills and the execution of that on our projects. So I'm just delighted to be here, and I look forward to the conversation we're going to have.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, I'm an iHeartMedia alumni. I worked there for 16 years.
I did not know that. Where were you?
I was in Atlanta.
Okay, we'll have to talk after this. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. We are just going to dive right into our questions. So for this first question, Maria, we will start with you and follow up with you, Dolly and Carrie. Maria, what characteristics have been most essential to your professional growth, and why?
Well, when I look at that, I think the characteristics really are first the ability to take risks. So I wasn't afraid to take risks, and then really having the resilience to say, if I took a risk and took a direction and I decided that might not have been the right direction for me, that I had the resilience to admit it, and then the initiative to chart my path to get back on task. So a good example of that is really early in my career. I launched my career at IBM in technical sales. I was a sales rep, and it was great. I was there for 4 years, training for 1, did really well, made their president's circle. It was all great, right? Had a great time. But I always knew I wanted to go to law school. And I also knew that I should work first to get some work experience, because I thought that would be important. So I decided to take that path. After 4 years at IBM, my boss telling me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I went ahead and went to law school at Villanova, graduated, practiced for a couple of years. And I think the young me thought I was going to save the world. And it really didn't kind of turn out that way. I self-financed my education. I came out with $90,000 worth of debt in the early 90s, which was a lot. And as I was practicing, I realized, this isn't the right direction for me. It's not really what I want to do. But it was very difficult, right? That was a big career decision. And it was a big thing to admit, like, this isn't the right thing to do. But I did. And I also, in tandem with that, was still in touch with people that I worked in the technology industry and said, okay, I really think this is the right path for me to get back on. And so I made that switch and I went back to technology sales. And in the end, it was probably the best thing I ever did. My legal degree helped me become a much more logical thinker, better negotiation skills, and actually gave me much more skills in negotiating contracts, which is very important in technology sales, which really helped me launch my career there. So it was all good, but I would tell you it wasn't easy.
see, Dolly, we'll go to you next on the same question. We are on what characteristics have been most essential to your professional growth
Okay.
and why?
That's what I have as question too, but I'm ready for at the ready. I think I love the risk taken. I think that's really important. And I think being able to do that is always important in a career. I think one of the things that's been really, really helpful to me in my career, and it was advice that was given to me early on when I was getting ready to leave an association and go work for a private company. And I asked a gentleman who was in government affairs at 3M at the time. And I promised to use no one's names because Washington's a small city, so we all know each other. But I said, what's going to be the thing that is going to surprise me most about corporate America or being in a corporation? And he said, Dolly, you're going to be so surprised at how important it is to be somebody that people want to have in the room. And I think particularly for women who kind of grow up and come of age on their knowledge base, how much they understand an industry sector, their understanding of the company. And that's all good. And you have to have that. That's foundational. But at the end of the day, and as you move up the ladder, you can be right, you can be smart, you can know your industry like no one else. But if you're not somebody that is pleasant to be around and people don't want in the room, that can really hurt you. And I didn't understand completely what he meant at the time, but I have seen it. And I really think for women in particular, holding your own in a room without in a way that doesn't exclude anyone, presenting your ideas in a way that are collegial, knowing when you've heard no from a group and moving on instead of becoming sort of argumentative. So those were sort of an early piece of advice that I think served me really, really well over a long period of time. So I would kind of throw that in, be somebody that people want to have in the room.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And Carrie, we'll end with you on this question. What characteristics have been most essential to your professional growth?
Yeah, I can't stress enough exactly what Maria and actually Dolly said, both being able to take risks and knowing when to take those risks, but then also just trying to be likable and kind of read the room, I would say is what Dolly was saying as well. But then I also think to add on to that, and we're going to talk a lot about it in the panel too, but being your authentic self. So not trying to go into a room and pretending to be someone that you're not trying to hold yourself back because you think that's what your boss wants you to do or your colleagues want you to do. So really explore who you are as an individual. And we're going to talk about it on one of the questions, but know your worth. That for me, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, has been probably the most important lesson learned that I've been able to take away. And I think all of that helps you to not only be a good mentee, but then also be a good mentor for other people who are going through and experiencing similar situations. So being able to relate and be relatable is also very important.
So for our next question, Jessica, we'll direct this question to you. Jessica, there's a lot of press about empathy and emotional intelligence in business. How do these things play into your leadership or management style? Do you think that women have an advantage in this area?
Generally, I do think that women have the advantage there because with emotional intelligence, we are really good at, and this is generally, reading a room, reading people, reading situations. We tend to be good, active listeners. And I think that that's a really important quality in being a leader as well. And I think the challenge is, though, that important skill set, we have to make sure as women in the workforce that our empathy and our emotional intelligence doesn't actually become a negative when you're leading a team, because you have to think about the whole team, and you have to maintain your professionalism when you're dealing with them, but because you want to support your team and provide them the resources that they want, but you don't want to become such the caretaker that you are no longer leading and inspiring. So I think that's a real challenge. And one of the things I try to do is to make sure that I create an environment that is, positive and well-mannered, and that you have all of the empathy and the courtesy and the respect amongst your teammates, so that you can take care of the team as a whole and help everybody get what they need for their professional development, and really achieve the goals of the team, and as well as become noticed in their own right up the chain, because you want to help people move up in their careers.
So as we move to our next question, Paula, we're going to start with you on this question. Paula, how have mentors, sponsors, and bosses helped you along your career path?
First of all, I would say I just love this question. I'm a tremendous believer in mentors and mentorship, and I think many of us, including myself, would not be here today in my career without the help of several remarkable mentors. As an example, the first member of Congress I worked for in Capitol Hill was really the first mentor to talk to me about what it means to be a woman in the workplace. And her advice is not what I expected. And it really leaned into being a woman should not impact how you do your work. And the fact that I am a woman, that's not what my success should be based on. But, given that she was a woman in Congress, she did talk about that gender equality does still exist. And really, a woman will mean that to succeed, you have to be the best person in the room. There are times you're going to have to be the smartest person, you're going to have to be the most prepared person. And you also have to trust your voice and not be afraid to use it. Most men don't have that problem, and women really do need to be more thoughtful in leaning forward and being part of the conversation. Just like Dolly, I just thought it was a great example, what you talked about, because it was also given to me. You want to be someone that people want to work with. So you have to have those hard skills of knowing what you're doing, but you have to have that emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And mostly one of the biggest lessons she talked about is learning how to tell truth to power. You can always be someone who does tell truth to power, but how you say it sometimes really means more than that. I've had several mentors throughout my career. I'm always looking for another one. There's so many smart, talented women out there. So anytime that there's someone I admire, someone who has a great leadership style or a fascinating career path, I'm always really quick to say, hey, can you have coffee, or can we have a conversation? But I also would urge folks to, mentor others. I think that, and don't be afraid to ask someone to be your mentor. I think people that have had mentors are happy to mentor others. And I strongly believe that as women, we have a responsibility to reach behind us and pull others up.
And Maria, we'll go to you next on the same question. Can you talk about mentors in your career path? Maria, can you say hello? Maybe, did we lose Maria? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next person. So Dolly, can you answer this question? Can you talk about mentors and sponsors along your career path?
Sure. And I think what Paula said is just so important. I mean, the more people, and it's funny, I've had people over time say, why are you meeting with so-and-so? Or so-and-so's kid calls and wants to know what it's like to be in DC, or somebody wants to be an intern or whatever. And I always take those calls. I always take those meetings because people took those early meetings with me. And so I always think it is right to kind of give back. I think one of the things that I identified, and I had to give a presentation on this, was I had to give examples of really good bosses I've had and then challenging bosses I've had. But in the plus column, I had a boss one time who asked me to give this speech, and it was a very large group. I had never done that. It was early in my career. And I was really nervous, but I didn't want to let him know I was really nervous. And so I called a friend of mine who had been public speaking, and I talked to her, and she gave me some advice and whatever. And long story short, I did fine, and it all went well and all of that. And I said to my boss afterwards, he said, oh, I got a lot of compliments on your presentation, and that's a really hard group. It was a group of physicians in Florida, and it was around Medicare changes that they were not particularly loving. And anyway, and I said, well, thank you. And I said, that was my first real public speaking event. And he said, that's great. And I said, how did you trust me with that? And he said, I've seen you in small group. I've seen you one-on-one with people. And I just assumed it was a transferable skill. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I could have done it if he had asked either for volunteers or whatever. It was just sort of, he had the confidence that I could do it, which gave me the confidence to think I could. So I think bosses who see in you things you're not quite, aren't quite ripened in you or honed in you yet. And, you know, I've been public speaking for a long time now, and I always have people say, oh, you make it look so easy. I'm like, oh, we should go back to the beginning of my public speaking because it wasn't easy. So I think people who see things in you before you see them would be a thought that I would accrue to a good boss.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Carrie, we'll end with you on this question. Can you talk about mentors in your career path?
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that not all bosses are mentors, which is we've all experienced that. So I think being able to navigate that, the challenging relationships, is something that I've learned. One of my favorite mentors was when I was at Amtrak, and she was the leader of our organization. And she pointed out that she didn't want to necessarily be considered a mentor. She wanted to be considered an advocate. And what that meant to her is that she was going to have honest conversations. She expected the same from me, complete honesty, complete openness. And then she would advocate for me along the way, not only at the organization that we currently were with, but then future organizations. I did have an opportunity to work with her at another organization, and I opted not. And we had a very honest conversation about it. If we had not established that early on, I don't think that we would have been able to have continued the mentorship after the fact. Something that I've been learning recently as I've been doing the storytelling at the organizations that I've worked with, that it's equally as important to be a good mentor, but you also have to be a good mentee. So what the responsibility of a mentee is to make sure that it's consistent, make sure that you're not putting all of the work on the mentor. And then also educating other mentees how to be a good mentor and mentee. So it's really very full circle. And, you know, just taking an opportunity to have honest conversations, challenging conversations, and then learning at every step of the way along the process.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So as we move along to our next question, for this question, Jessica, we're going to start with you and follow up with you, Carrie and Paula. Jessica, one of the most important traits for professional growth is confidence. Yet we know that women often don't feel comfortable applying for promotions unless they are 100% qualified. Developed and promoted your own sense of confidence and worth throughout your career.
Yeah, that's true. Confidence is so important for leadership advancement. And when you don't have it, it really can impact your career path. And so you have to make sure that you have something to be confident about. And I know all the ladies here on the panel we've been talking about, you always have to be the most prepared, you know, be the subject matter expert, essentially, so that you know objectively that you are confident and you do deserve to have a promotion or to get that raise or whatever it is that you want in terms of moving up the chain. But the world won't consider you a confident leader unless you do. And so you really have to develop that skill. And I think that confidence is an important part of your social skills toolkit so that you can get people to know, like, and trust you. So they want to work with you, they want to work for you eventually, or they want you on your team. I'm like evangelical about the importance of social skills, such that 85% of one's professional success has been directly linked to one's social skills. It's like, and part of that is how confident you are and how do you project, how do you present to the world. And so you really have to make sure that you're focusing on that. So I try to because we all, I think at one point or another have had imposter syndrome. You think, why am I here? Why am I leading this team? Why am I working on this project? Everybody else is pretty fabulous. And you really have to intentionally treat yourself with the grace and the support that you give to all of your mentees or to your friends or to your colleagues, because we deserve to have that grace pointed back toward us. So you need to act the way you want to feel and develop that skill set of confidence and to ask for that promotion. And once you start developing those soft skills, they're like a force multiplier. You're going to start feeling less of like an imposter and really realize that you do deserve to be the leader in your organization. You do deserve to get that promotion. And so it's going to be easier to ask for those things. And you do need to ask. It's very rare for you to always get what you deserve. And I think sometimes women are very content to be part of the team and not really highlight your own value sometimes, because you're like, I'm doing my job. This is what I need to do. And I have 5 other million things I need to do. And whether it's taking care of family or spouse, children, taking care of parents, doing other charitable work. So we fit a lot in our professional day. So you need to make sure that you ask for what you think you deserve. And when I was starting out, I did rely on mentors to help me navigate those really awkward conversations. And you just have to be comfortable being uncomfortable for a little bit. And as long as you have valid reasons for making sure why you're asking for something, then I think you're fine. One of the specific things I did when I was negotiating, when I joined the company I'm at now, I actually pretended I was asking for a package for my husband. We were newly married. I thought he walked on water. We had both worked on Capitol Hill, so I'd seen him in action. I thought he was incredibly smart. And I would ask for the moon for him and do it unapologetically, respectfully, positively. And so I pretended I was asking for him. And it got me out of my own way. And I've actually used that on various other times I've had to ask for things throughout my career. Sometimes I'm not asking for Dave. Sometimes I'm asking for my daughters, or I think I'm asking for my sister or my mom. But it's just someone that you really love and that you think deserves something. And that really helped me develop that skill set of confidence.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrie, we'll go to you next on the same question.
Yeah, this is a great question. I love this question. And I think back to advice my mother gave me when I was a teenager. And that was, not everyone is staring at you as much as you think that they're staring at you. And that gave me a little bit more confidence that I could walk into a room and not worry about if everyone was staring at me when I walked into the room. And then it also gave me the ability to look outward and really look at what other people are doing in similar situations. So if you go into a networking event and you're feeling a little bit less confident, if you just look around, you're going to find people who are, maybe feeling the same curious, questionable, what's everyone doing in this room? And you're in that in itself, being self-aware and being aware of what's going on around you gives you a little bit of confidence. And I've carried that through, whether it's making a decision to leave an organization, making the decision to ask for a promotion, making a decision to take a lead on a project that maybe I'm not necessarily the best person or have 100% confidence in myself, because you have to take a chance on yourself. The other part of what I'll say is a book. I've been on an interesting journey the past 4 years, and it's called How Women Rise. And I actually keep it at my desk. So I'm looking down at it, but it is a daily inspiration. It's called How Women Rise, and it's Break the 12 Habits of Holding yourself back. And one of the chapters is, if you're doing something really amazing and that you're very proud of it, if you don't tell people that you're doing an amazing job, no one is going to know. So it's okay to brag. It's okay to share your wins. And if you don't, no one's going to know. So I keep this book, and there's lots of other great pieces of advice, just staying on track, next to me. And when I'm feeling a little less confident, I pull it out. And it's a good reminder to just have that confidence in your own self and be ready for the next step.
Well, thank you. And Paula, we'll go to you next. Can you talk about professional growth?
Well, first I would say this question is awesome, but my confidence is shaken because Carrie and Jessica's answers were so amazing. And I couldn't agree with them more. It's so funny, Carrie, you mentioned your mom. I'm going to mention my grandmother. There are two pieces of advice that have stuck with me, and really can apply to almost any situation, but really in the workforce. If you don't ask, you don't get. So wholeheartedly believe with Carrie and Jessica, no one's going to be your advocate. You have to be your own advocate. Things you deserve will not automatically be given to you. And if you think it from an employer, perspective, if you're here, you're doing awesome work and you're not asking for more money, then I get to retain that money, or I get to, retain those opportunities. So you really want to be the one that asks. I would also say that advocating for yourself, to Jessica's point, it really literally is a skill and it takes practice. And I promise you that the more you ask for things, the more natural it will become. At this point in my career, I am not shy and I can ask for just about anything. I would just caution how you ask makes a big difference too. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing too, because I think I was a little bit more of an anxious kid, and my grandmother used to say this to me all the time too, is what if you ask, what is the absolute worst that will happen? They're not going to throw, rocks at you or, say you're fired or get out of here. The worst that's going to happen is they'll tell you no. But usually with that no, they give you a little bit of feedback, which really helps in your growth experience. I would just say, from a confidence builder, one of the biggest things that have helped me throughout my career is really building my self-awareness. It's definitely a soft skill. The more I advance in my career, it's really fascinating to me that not a lot of people have this skill, and it really is incredibly valuable. I think you need to know where you're at in order to figure out where you're going, and then those two things matter when you're asking for what you want. People who have a high degree of self-awareness recognize how their feelings affect them, others, your job performance. It extends your understanding of your values, your goals. And it really does mean you know where you're headed and why. That promotion is not just because of, you want it because of your ego. It's because you know what your value is, you know what you want to do with it, the work is exciting. And having that firm grasp of what your capabilities are and how to take calculated risks really helps you talk about the value you bring to an organization. I think, the other thing too is, as we're talking about the skill and self-awareness, you take those lessons and you build your stump speech. And you should always have some sort of stump speech ready where you can advocate for yourself or talk about a success, a project you've taken on, and where you've not been shy, but you really want to start thinking about how you would talk about that, how you would shine that light on that, and really not necessarily focus it on yourself. But focus it instead of, because of these skills, I have been able to bring value to this organization.
Well, as we move on to our next question, Maria, we're going to start with you on this question. Maria, how do you share your accomplishments without bragging?
Super great question.
It is a great question. I think Paul summed a lot of it up. And first of all, I apologize. I dropped off because I actually lost power and internet there for a little bit. And I was like, of all the times for it to happen. So sorry about that.
We're glad you're back.
I'm glad I'm back too. I think it is part of part of it first is recognizing yourself for what you've accomplished, right? Like one of the things that I find myself doing, and I think a lot of people who are, harder driving, I'm so busy, like, okay, that's done, right? I'm done, finished, right? Now I have to do this. I haven't accomplished this. This has to be done. And you're so focused on what has to be done, you're not giving yourself credit for what you have done.
Mhm.
So what I've tried to consciously do is to celebrate that a little bit and appreciate, even write it down, to be perfectly blunt, not just on, when you get your appraisals or whatever, but write that down. So I can understand, hey, we as teams, we've accomplished a lot and we should celebrate this. And I think really being able to do that, look at it as a holistic, like I've accomplished it, but I'm usually part of a team, and recognizing that it's not I, but it's we that accomplished it, is really a way to talk about it and the benefits that it brought without it really being bragging. It's more about, hey, these accomplishments, are me and the team, as well as really we're doing this for the benefits of the organization, of the company, or whatever the mission is that we're driving towards with these accomplishments. So that's kind of how I have done it throughout my career.
So Dolly, we'll go to you next on the same question. Dolly, how do you share your accomplishments without bragging?
Well, this is my favorite question of the whole bunch, because I think women need so much help with this. And I think men, they just can't help it. I know men who are bragging about legislation they helped pass in 1994, and they've made their whole lives around it. So I wrote down a couple of things. I had one, I agree with, writing down your accomplishments all year, because you will forget a big something you did in January or February when you come to December, or you're looking at your budget for the next year, et cetera, and you want to be recognized for what you did. I think shouting out others, calling attention to people's successes, that you were part of the team. And as you get more veteran in your career, you get the credit without saying, I want the credit, by crediting other people. Being a good leader means I'm going to give this credit away, and I don't have to say my role in it. People will, they know, and they will feel that. I'd also say use newsletters in your company, social media, to kind of brag about what you're doing without, again, talking about you as much as the team effort and the importance of that effort financially to the company or to the organization. I'd also say repeat your accomplishments. Your boss, others around you, senior leaders have a ton going on. They have other direct reports. So, you might feel like you're boasting, but repeating it a few times, throwing it into conversations, including it in your presentations, so that over time the boss gets it. Man, this was a big deal, and associates you with that and your team with that. I also think, and you have to do this the right way, and I'm not recommending anybody be, sort of crazy out there, but I think every once in a while, conversationally, it helps to mention either a call you got from a recruiter about another position. I think it helps you to mention, oh, gee, I got a call from, I'll say in the pharmaceutical sector, another company. Interesting. And just so your boss knows you are getting these calls, you have value, your value is known in the marketplace. It's not just known internally, but that you have a reputation in your industry. The other thing, and I was going to mention this because I've seen this a lot, and the job I just left, there was somebody in particular, and I loved him. He was a really nice man. He was head of US commercial. And whenever we were on meetings and I would express an idea or I would say something, he would always repeat it back, but he'd say, I can't remember who said that, but it was a really good idea. I think George said it. Well, George was my boss. I sound nothing like George. I look nothing like George. And it happened all the time. And so finally on a call, when Tom did this, and I can't even remember what I said, it was something on biosimilars. And Tom said, George, I think you had a good idea there. And I said, Tom, as much as George and I work well together, I said that. And George started laughing. He said, I was about to say the same thing. So don't be afraid to say, those are my ideas, in a funny way. You don't have to be, nasty about it. But you can make sure that your ideas are garnered and you get the credit for them. I'd say you can't play that card a lot, but judiciously you can, and you know who the people are who kind of take your ideas. So I hope those things are helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And Carrie, we'll end with you on this question. Can you talk about sharing your accomplishments without bragging?
I would probably echo everything everyone's saying. So I think probably the biggest thing is taking notes, so that you're not put on a spot and you don't have to recall all of the things. And don't skip on the little things. If you help to improve a process by suggesting one little change, make sure you put that in there, because that's going to impact everyone else at the organization or in your team, on your team. I think not letting other people take credit for some of the things that you're doing. And one of the ways to get ahead of that is to self-promote. And that is something that it can be as easy as, sharing a celebration or offering to recognize someone on your team. It's also something that when I start with managing a new team, I will say, please keep track of all of the things that you're doing so that I can help celebrate, and that at the end of the year, we can celebrate as a team. Something else that I take into consideration is any kind of goals that are of people on my team. Ultimately, they are my goals. And so it's the team goals that we celebrate together. Again, I'll reference that book. It gives you kind of a step-by-step of how to do that and do it in a way that doesn't sound or feel like you're bragging. Just being consistent, I think, is probably the biggest thing, is being consistent with yourself and being consistent with how you're promoting what your accomplishments are.
Well, thank you. So we're getting down to the final two questions of our panel. So for this question, Dolly, we'll start with you and follow up with you, Paula. Dolly, have you ever experienced resistance in your career that felt gender-based, and how did you handle that?
I have a couple times, and I thought about this. There was one point in my career where I was senior director and another fellow I was working with was senior director, and the VP was leaving, and we both applied for the job. And I know exactly why I got the job. And the boss at the time asked some really tough questions. And I think my male counterpart gave him kind of softball answers. And I went there. He said, "What would you do about this?" I told him. And sometimes, again, it might not be the answer he wants to hear, but it was always kind of truth to power. And at the end, when I got the job, of course, my male colleague said, "Well, you got it because you were a woman." And I said, "You know what? I don't think so. I think it's because I really gave the boss hard answers about some situations that we're facing as a team. And I just wouldn't acknowledge that, even though he felt that way. And I always pushed back whenever, and he would joke about it sometimes, and I'd joke right back. I think the other thing, and I say this especially to people, kind of just starting out, I had an experience when I was at Roche, and we were divided into different working groups to work on this piece of legislation. And every Monday we'd come together, and each group would do a readout. And my responsibility was working with other patient groups. So I'd come in and say, "Here's where we are with these groups," and whatever. And there was one guy with another company, older than me at the time, one of the more senior people probably in that setting. And I started to give my report, and he just talked right over me. And it was in front of, there's probably 80 people in the room, and it's all of my peers. And I started again. I kind of cleared my throat to kind of, tell him I wasn't done talking. And he did it again. And long story short, I decided, you know what, if I make a scene here, not good, and I look like the attention-seeking woman that nobody wants to be. But I called him later and I said, "I'm sure you didn't mean to do this, and it's probably an oversight, but every time I tried to speak to give my report this morning, you jumped in and kind of talked over me. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I think my report was important to the group's efforts," and blah, blah. He sent me flowers. He came downstairs. We were in the same building, ironically. And he said, "I am so sorry. I didn't know I did that. I certainly didn't do it intentionally." And years later, he told me that helped me so much. And especially with women, I tried very hard. Let people finish. Don't jump in. So sometimes saying something when you see it, but I don't think he would have done that to a guy, frankly. So those are a couple of examples.
Oh, that's wonderful. And can I tell you, I am an interrupter. So any feedback, I always ask people if I've been an interrupter, because it's a bad habit.
Me too. I'm the worst. Yeah.
So Paula, we'll go to you next on the same question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really am just fully in love with that story, Dolly. And I think, clearly it was unconscious, and there is a lot of that still. And the fact that you pointed out, and the fact that he took it and he learned from it, is remarkable. And I think it just goes back to your point of, if you've encountered that in your career, find a way to call it out, be respectful about it, etc. But I mean, those flowers were probably big and beautiful. So well done. I have absolutely faced gender bias in my career early on. There was a situation where I lost out on a promotion to a less qualified man. I think the hard part about that, and wrapping your head around it, though, it was clear to me, though, that did not make me special. It actually happens more often than not. It was definitely unconscious. I think the manager who was hiring was good friends with him and had a better rapport because he was a man. And I think the hardest part is internalizing that and figuring out, how do I move forward, and how do I make the best of the situation? I don't think any of us has to tell you this, even though there have been strides, gaps persist study after study. We earn less, we get promoted less frequently, underrepresented in the highest leadership positions in business. But, in that situation, those facts are, that's true, but really you're focused on the self. And in my situation, I chose to stay calm and really to take stock. I did my research, looked at other people in my position, what sort of projects and responsibilities they had, what their pay scale was. And I took that back. I really sat down and thought about what I would need to feel excited and empowered in that current role to stay. And I think it's really important for women to realize, too, that just because you're not chosen does not mean that they don't want to keep you. If, in fact, quite the opposite is true. They very much are nervous about what that decision is going to mean and what you're going to think about it. And so, I chose to be an advocate for myself and made the case for a raise. And I also looked for other opportunities to develop, leadership projects and skills. So I was remaining in front of those managers and doing that sort of work. And I think, in general, every woman has to make their own choice. But if you didn't get a role, you have to reflect on your shortcomings. If you're lacking a certain skill, you got to go out and find a way to build that skill. And then you got to ask for opportunities to highlight that skill. And that goes back to advocating for yourself without sounding like bragging. But at the end of the day, loyalty is important and it's certainly valued within companies, but you have to feel good about your situation. And you have to feel like there is still room for you to grow. And so don't be afraid to find a better situation, one where you feel like you'd feel valued, you'd have more opportunities, and there's definitely growth opportunity.
Well, we're getting to our final question of our panel. And for this question, Jessica, we're going to direct it to you. Jessica, what advice can you give to someone who is looking to become a stronger leader? And how can they translate these leadership skills into promotions and positions of influence inside companies?
This is the perfect follow-up question to the stories that Dolly and Paula just shared with us in terms of how they handled some challenging situations with grace and confidence. And I think that's why that they were able to turn the situation around and actually helped them advance in their career. And those skill sets, to be able to be gracious and confident, I think come under that, in that toolkit of your social skills. And so I would say to somebody, if you really want to advance in your career, it's great to be the subject matter expert. You need to know your stuff. That's the floor. I think the icing on the cake for you are your social skills, and part of that is your personal brand. And you should treat your personal brand as a project. All of us, when you're at this level, you're very conscientious. You don't let any balls drop. You are very focused and intentional. Your personal brand, you get one throughout your career, whether you do it intentionally or it becomes baggage to you because you're going to get it anyway. What people think of you, that becomes part of your personal brand. So I think for your advancement, for anybody's advancement, I know I worked on this myself, is that I did treat it like a project. What do I want to be known for? What do I not want to be known for? And that was the prism through which I made most of my career decisions, and the small ones to the really big ones, because that helped me be consistent. It allowed me to be authentic, but always to put my best version of myself forward. And I think that when you do that, people will know, like, and trust you because they think that you are consistent and confident and a leader, and they will want to work with you. So, and I would work on personal deportment as part of that, because that's the easiest way. People form an impression of you within a matter of seconds. And most of it is not on what you say. Actually, 7%. It was actually the content of your words, as scary as that seems. But the rest of it is made up of what your body is saying and how you look. You don't need to be a model, but you need to look the part in terms of dressing the part, carrying yourself in a way that conveys respect and positivity. Because when you do that, that's the energy you're going to get back, and people will want to work with you and want you on their team. That would be the one thing I think a lot of people overlook.
Can I just,
Very well said.
I was just going to
Well,
interrupt.
ladies, thank you. Absolutely.
Sorry, I was just going to compliment Jessica because I don't think we spoke enough about it, but I think your points on personal brand are so important. And I literally wrote down in big letters is, what do you want to be known for? And to your point, I think as you're growing your career, that can be a touchstone. And if you're in a difficult situation, if you didn't get a promotion, or you're going for a big job, or there was this conflict at work, focusing on what do I want to be known for also helps you figure out how you address the situation. I just thought that was a great point.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well said.
Hey, my friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and share your biggest takeaway. And if you're wanting more, you can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. You can also get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or a networking group near you. Or if you just need to access your membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Because here at Women Leaders Association, we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. That's all for today, my friends. Bye for now.